Hey guys, good afternoon. You know the drill. Hey
Look at that.
everyone. Hey Plant Bay. Oh, that was quick.
I know. Oh, we got it down this time. Oh, yeah.
Yes. So we're
Hi,
just waiting for a few
everyone.
more people to come in. Hey Angie.
How's everyone's week going? Pape, how are you? How was your
I'm
week?
so excited. Today's Friday Junior, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's the best day before Friday, before the weekend. How's your week going?
My week's been good. I've been very distracted because I've been, watching the Olympics all week. And the boys, now they're at an age where they understand like the competition of it, and like it's just
Mm-hmm.
so cute watching them. And they know prime time is when we want to watch stuff. So
Yeah.
they'll look at the clock and be like, hey, can we put the Olympics on? So, oh my gosh, it's hot in SD. Here it's really hot here too. I had to water the outdoor plants twice because it's been so hot.
Oh, I
But
had
I
to
won't complain.
refill. Yeah. I
Yeah.
had to refill my reservoir too.
Yeah. Oh man.
But it's not as hot here, but it's hot compared to the other days that we used to,
Yeah.
have.
105 in Texas. Holy moly. Where in Texas
Whoa.
are you? Ooh, it is hot.
Um,
Oh, that's
Mars, Texas. Okay.
yeah. I know. Make sure your outdoor BBs are good.
Yes, this is your reminder to hydrate yourself and your plants as
Yes.
well. But that's not the topic for this
No.
week's Planted.
All right, you guys, welcome to another week of Planted with Kay and Sai. My name is Kay. I am the enthusiast behind In Rooted Love, and this handsome guy on the screen with me is.
Cyril, and I'm also the creator behind Cyril Cybernated. So
Yes.
welcome to everyone.
Yes, and this week, you guys, we are going to do, so if you saw my stories, I said it's going to be a lightning episode. We're going to try and get through this really quick. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
quick crash course on substrate. Not so much composition of mixes and stuff like that, but more just like the individual elements. So we'll go through each one, kind of, talk about what they're great for. Sorry, I said we won't talk about composition in depth, let's say that. But when's a good time to use this and that, and then of course we'll talk about the
Mm-hmm.
inorganic substrates as well, because we get asked a lot. And we realized we were talking this week, and we were like, we never really talked about substrates. Like we throw around pond,
Yeah.
Lecca, peat, perlite, spag, all this stuff, but like
Mm-hmm.
we've never really talked about it on like a very basic introductory level. So um, let's do that. Ready?
Yes. So
Let's
yeah,
do
let me start with the probably the most famous, and everybody would have gone through this major substrate, which is soil,
it.
which most of us know as dirt, made up of a lot of organic matter. Also has water, both living and dead organic material make up your dirt. Probably I would say 90% of the people I know grow their plants in dirt. Um, of course, dirt or soil on its own, depending on where it's taken from, can be very heavy. I think in the Philippines, we used to say like, oh, loam soil versus clay soil. So there's also different types and compositions. But in general, like soil is already good enough for plants. Like in nature, depending on what plant it is, they normally thrive in soil. What else? I do have a cheat sheet here just to make sure that I'm not skipping through the important information.
So soil
Um,
is like the norm, okay? Like for
mhm.
me, it's not, but in the plant world, using soil as a component for your media is the norm. Um, I understand it actually pretty well, but I don't use it. So, there is that. And the great thing about soil is that it offers nutrients. It's like it's readily available there. Whereas, like when
Mhm.
with the method that I use in passive hydro, I have to provide nutrients, with organic media, because there is that decomposing aspect of it. You know, there is nitrogen in that composition already. Is it enough? No, because when you buy a plant, right, even though it's in organic media, you'll still find slow release fertilizer there. And they always, you know, we always say, make sure you're fertilizing your plants in active growth. But it does add, you know, not add, but it does include some nutrients that plants need, which is why they use it outdoors, which is why in nature they grow in organic media. But so there's soil.
And probably because of that organic media. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm gonna take a sip. You go.
Also, yeah, I was gonna say, like, to add to that, because of that organic media, it can also make it prone to pests, especially if we bring that on an indoor setting, right? And that can be the disadvantage of soil. And that's primarily why you switched, or you decided to go for inorganic growing in your household, correct?
It is. The idea of having soil and things other than the plant living in it and thriving in it just didn't sit well with me. I'm a clean freak when it comes to that. So yeah, like the whole pest thing, just like, don't get me wrong, you can get pests with inorganic media. It is possible. It happens. It's happened to me. But pest management, which we're not going to really get into today, but pest management, in my opinion, is a lot more manageable with inorganic substrates. And, you know, we'll do pest management one day for a topic. But yeah, for soil, I cannot. You guys, I can't. The only things that I have in soil right now, and it's not completely soil, it's like a cactus mix, are my Sedum organianums. And you guys have heard me say this, but that's the only thing that I maintain in soil. That's it. Oh, and I do have an Epiprenum marble queen, but that's because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so you talked about soil. How does soil differ from peat moss?
Well, peat moss is like also just the fluffy material of the decomposing matter. So it does retain a lot of moisture or water, and usually peat moss is taken from swamps or peatland areas or peatland spaces that, you know, they harvest through the years. What is my other description for peat moss? How would I describe it? I don't know a better word.
Because I think of peat moss and soil the same, only peat moss is more water retaining. That's all I know about it.
Yeah, I would say that's a really good description. You know, there's probably like a thin line between them, but based on the descriptions on what I research. So there's specifically the decomposed organic matter in the swamps that they probably harvest and make that as the peat moss.
Yum.
Yummy. Full of nutrients.
Yeah.
Or speaking of swamps and like peatland spaces, we also have something that I always interchange, like cocoa coir or cocoa peat or cocoa fiber. So they're actually made of processed coconut fibers, and they're also like lightweight, very airy. They can mimic peat as well, but there's also in contrast to that, there's no nutrients in them.
Right.
So I would think like if you're gonna go to like advanced gardening, when you start mixing your own substrates, knowing those things would, you know, allow you to amend your soil better. If you're like someone who overwaters like me, then you probably would want to introduce something that will make your mix airier instead of like soggy and less water retaining. So maybe less of the peat moss, you know.
So cocoa coir and coconut
peat.
fiber and husk, they all come from the coconut husk, right? It's just different processes. So cocoa coir is more reminiscent of like soil or peat, where it's really small ground up coconut husk. And then there's I've seen coconut husk that's like cubed. And I see that a lot with like imports, especially from like Thailand or Indonesia, where they grow them in that, especially for the epiphytes, you know, from what I've seen. But again, I don't have any experience growing with any of that. But they sound
but
cool
most
though.
of the time when you get your plants locally, they come in those pre-mixed garden substrates, right? Like I bet your sedum morgianum also came with like this. It would have some coconut fiber because I see that as a standard from all these succulent growers. When I, you know, uproot some plants, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of cocoa fiber here or cocoa peat. And I think it's kind of like a standard.
Yeah, it looks like from the little bit that I've looked in there, it's some type of either soil, peat moss, or coco coir, and then there's some chunkiness mixed in there. So I think I want to say it's orchid bark that's mixed in there to add a bit of chunk, and then a ton of perlite that's mixed in there.
Yeah, which is our next substrate.
Perlite!
So perlite is a fluffy material. It's made from like expanded vitreous rocks, if I'm not mistaken. So they're very airy. They promote drainage and air circulation, but just like the other substrates, they don't provide nutrients on its own. So we have to remember that it can be a bit toxic, especially if you inhale the powder. So the ones that I buy just from your big box stores are very almost fine already. Ideally, they could be on the chunkier side. But that would probably be perlite. I mean, pumice already. But yeah, the perlite is usually like airy, small, powdery, which you shouldn't inhale because it could be toxic, and it can also get messy. Actually, I have some perlite examples here. Example, actually. So this is perlite. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not
so
to be
I did
confused
propagate
with
something
pumice.
in this.
Perlite and pumice are two different
because
things.
Pumice is like heavier. Yes. I used perlite because it's so airy. It's perfect for rooting and propagation. I actually managed to save my gunung gading because of my perlite propagation. It's only one node and it almost died on me. So I place it in perlite, just, you know, I take a container, I mist it, put this on top of a heat mat, and voila, even my serpent's nice. Propagation is thriving.
So you can totally use perlite for passive hydro setups because it's inert, inorganic, and porous. It meets the three things or the criteria for passive hydro substrates. I don't grow in perlite just because I have other substrates easily like available to me. But if I had a big bag of that chunky perlite, which looks amazing, by the way, have you guys seen those like huge chunks? I would totally root in perlite because it's a lot cheaper than pon. But you know, so that is an option for my passive hydro growers. So the next one is sphagnum moss, which all of us are familiar with. And, you know, sphagnum moss can be added, like you can chop it up and add it to any organic mix, or you can use it alone as Sai is using here. Were you propagating in this one?
Yeah, this is where my variegated Adansonii is growing. So I'm just letting this establish the roots because moss doesn't have nutrients on its own. So whenever I water, as you guys know, I also fertilize weekly. So I feel like I'm taking care of the nutrient part whenever I fertilize on top of moss. But we have to remember, although it's airy, it can retain moisture, especially if you like pack everything in a small container. So make sure just to squeeze it after you moisten or keep wet your moss, and then just don't pack it too much so that it'll still be, you know, it'll still give you enough circulation for your propagation or your plants. See, healthy roots.
I typically stay away from spag moss just because it's such a nightmare for me to clean off the spag when I do convert it over to Lecca or pon. But you know, I use it all the time for moss poles, obviously.
I agree.
Yeah. And then for germinating seeds, I like to use spag as long as it's in like a prop box, because then the moisture maintenance is a lot easier. But outside of a prop box, I have a lot of trouble with sphagnum moss because it's either soaking or dry. I can't find that happy medium with spag. But it is, you know.
And I get.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but when propping, I probably leave my prop too long on moss. That's why it's super hard to get them from moss. But maybe if you just give them a few weeks and they start sprouting, and then you immediately transfer it to your preferred medium, then that might make it easier. But yeah, it's also hard for me.
Totally. So next, so a lot of these components you guys will notice, like, you probably aren't going to be using them just on its own unless you're like propagating, right? We like to keep things simple when we're propagating. But a lot of them may be considered like amendments to whatever mix you're making. So if you guys scroll through these comments, you'll see a lot of our friends here are sharing their different mixes, and they're throwing in, you know, the ratios for certain things. So one of the things that a lot of gardeners like to add is horticultural charcoal, which is really great to, first, you know, it helps with drainage, it helps with a bit of that airiness, but it's also a really great component to fight like fungal and bacterial issues, which kind of makes sense, right? Because like if you're out in the wild and you get a tummy ache, if you chew on some charcoal, that kind of helps with your tummy ache.
Really? I didn't know that. Let me bring some horticultural charcoal with me all the time now.
I know, right? Keep it in your pocket, guys. But yeah, so, you know, that's another option. And then the next is pumice. We kind of touched on it earlier, but pumice is a volcanic rock. It's heavier than perlite, looks very similar to perlite. I love pumice. I am a huge fan of pumice. It's not as easily accessible, I think, compared to perlite. But if you go to any like bonsai specialty stores or shops, they're gonna have perlite, or excuse me, pumice. And again, it meets the criteria for passive hydro because it's inert, inorganic, and porous. So you can definitely use pumice for any passive hydro setups. You can use it alone, or if you use one of my favorite medias, which now we're going to switch over to inorganics, Lechuza Pon. Oh, love Lechuza Pon. Let me, can I see some love first from all of my Pon stars? I know you're there.
Yeah, represent our Pon stars. I saw Eunice earlier. I'm converting Angie into a Pon star.
Yes. So Pon, for those who are unfamiliar, it's spelled P-O-N. Pon is a proprietary blend made by Lechuza. The only actual Pon out there is by Lechuza, guys, okay? So don't get duped here. But it is made up of German mined pumice, German mined lava rock, and zeolite. And it is just the most beautiful mixture of these three components. Look at that. I mean, the zeolite is just so sexy.
The zeolite.
It's like this blue color. It's so gorgeous. But aside from looking beautiful, I have found, at least in my collection, that it is just such an ideal media to use for passive hydro, with the caveat of having enough light for your plant. If Kay would empty her garage, we could get... No, I don't have that much anymore, you guys.
Oh my God.
Jeez, Angie over here calling me out. Getting hot. But Lechuza Pon is just, it's amazing. It's what I use for plants that I feel need a little bit more density when it comes to the passive hydro media. So what do I mean by that? My anthuriums, from my experience here in my home and my growing style, my anthuriums were very sensitive to huge temperature fluctuations. So y'all are just calling me, you guys are like in these comments. But what I found is that Pon keeps that root zone you know, like just a cozy temperature for my anthuriums. I have successfully rotted and desiccated anthurium roots using Lecca because we had a temperature drop in the house over the winter and it was just done. But after that episode, this last winter, I moved all my anthuriums, and at the time it was, I can count it on one hand. I moved them to pond, and they just they've grown successfully in it. So if you guys aren't familiar with what it looks like, here is my Anthurium forgetii silver stripes, and I'll bring it up here. Hopefully I don't make a mess. This is newly potted, so, but this here is pond. And yeah, you can just see, like, it looks like a bonsai mix. It's not a bonsai mix. Most bonsai mix still have some type of soil in it. But pond is just, like I said, it's this beautiful combination of pumice, lava rock, and zeolite, and I'm obsessed. And I will say, and I'm going to sound very snobby, I'll warn you guys now, there are many things I'm not a purist about, but pond is one of them. I have seen faux pond, DIY ponds. That's actually like a trademark infringement, guys, so be careful with that. But I've seen these DIY, you know, takes on pond, and they're just not the same. It really isn't. Pond is the best. If you're looking for that gritty mix for passive hydro, I love pond. I talk it up, but I just love it. I'm a huge fan. Now that I've talked everyone's ear off on pond, do you have anything to add?
I agree. I mean, I haven't gotten to the point that I had to DIY my own pond, but based on my other friends' experience, of course, there are others that can try to measure up to the actual mixture, but I'm just fortunate that I buy them on time. But I don't store them on my garage because we don't have a garage. We only have a parking space here in where I'm renting at. So all the pond is on Case Garage. Okay. No, in addition, so no, this is not a sponsored episode by Pond, but hello Pond, if ever. No, I'm kidding.
I know, would you hashtag sponsor me, please?
Yes. Let's talk about the other inorganic medium.
Yes.
Let's not be biased and let's talk about balls or the Leca.
Yes, I love balls. So as much as I love pond, everyone here knows that pond is expensive and pond is not accessible at all. You guys go on the website right now, you'll find that it's out of stock. And when it does go on stock, it's like the Hunger Games on their website and it's gone like that. Like, you just got to be quick. So my rule for potting things up is if it can go in Lecca, it is going in Lecca. So obviously anthuriums don't count for that because all my anthuriums go in pond. But Lecca is those little Cocoa Puffs, balls, and it stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. Do you have balls handy there? Sorry.
Yeah, I have one. I always have balls handy. Okay.
So here, I've got, there you go. What is that, a subpinata?
Excuse the sick zipalanum. I mean, yeah, but yeah, it is. So it finally started growing, but the roots have been crazy. But yeah, the old leaf finally fell after 2 years.
Oh. So
yeah, show us the balls.
Let me show you balls. This is it. Lecca. Lecca is used a lot in hydroponic growing, and that's actually where I buy my Lecca, is at, you know, the hydroponic supply stores. It is the best bang for your buck, you guys. For a 50 pound, is it 50 pound or 50 liter bag, which is about the same size as me, it's about $32. And in my 3 years of collecting, I've only needed 3 of those bags. So I'd say that's pretty good. And the great thing about Lecca is that, and the same with pond, is that you can reuse it indefinitely. All you have to do is just make sure that you're sanitizing it between uses. So what I do is I just, I throw them in a pot and I boil them. And, you know, once they've cooled down, then they're ready to go. But Lecca is my choice of media for most of my passive hydro plants. Don't mind the yellow leaf. It's staying there because it's still working. But yeah, it's just, you know, like I said, it's the most economic option for passive hydro. It's readily available. It really does provide a great moisture to air ratio in the root zone. And as long as you're maintaining it correctly, meaning, you know, your reservoir never goes bone dry, it works well for capillary action. And the plant is able to pull what it needs when it needs. It's hard to think that it does, right? Because they're huge and like there's a lot of space in between them, but I promise it works. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. And like my big plants are in Lecca and they do fine in it. So
yeah, and there's also like smaller hydroton balls because
right.
yeah, I found some at the pet store, and that might be your thing, especially for smaller plants. You know, if the large ones are too much for you.
Yeah.
Eunice said no me gusta balls. She doesn't like the balls.
No, she's not a fan of the balls. She's told me this before. I'm always telling her like, put it in balls, and she's like, no, hate it.
Nope. Eunice is a certified pawn star.
She
for
is.
Sure.
Yes. But if 50 liters seems like a lot for you, which for me at the first time I bought a huge bag like that, I thought it was out of control. I know IKEA sells like 5-gallon bags of them. A lot of smaller plant shops now are also carrying, you know, bags, like gallon bags of Leca. So I think it's become a lot more popular. I've seen folks use it to amend organic substrates as well, just to add a bit of chunk to it. But for me, you know, I solely use it for passive hydro growing, and I think it's fabulous. I love it. What plants are ideal for Lecca? All. I really think that. So the media, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. The media you're using, whatever combination it is, whether it's organic or inorganic, that composition is directly related to the amount of light your plant is going to receive. And that also means that the frequency in which you're watering will also be directly affected by your media plus your light source and the intensity of your light plus your light duration. So I know that's a lot going on, right? But to simplify it, say you have, let's just pick a Monstera deliciosa, right? Say you're growing a Monstera in a greenhouse down in Florida, outside where the temperatures are, you know, 80 and above all the time because they have great weather down there and it's warm and it's humid. You can't be out there watering every, like, you know, twice a day because that's just not practical, right? So you're going to want to choose a more, a denser mixture so that you can support the growth of that plant. Now, if you take that same plant, you bring it indoors, let's say in Chicago, right? You bring a Monstera deliciosa indoors in Chicago where it, you know, it gets maybe a couple hours of direct sunlight from an east-facing window, but the temperature is a lot more human tolerable. So we're talking, you know, anywhere between 60 to 70, whether you have your AC or your heater on. Your plant isn't going to be drinking water as much as if it were growing outdoors in Florida. So you want to have a chunkier, airier mix so that your roots are able to breathe and aren't soaking in just wet, soggy media. And this is why it's super important to be you know, well-informed on different components of substrates, because when you get a plant, most likely that plant, even if you got it from like a plant shop, that plant was grown at a farm somewhere in warmer weather and it was shipped to the plant shop. So whatever media it's in, unless like the shop like changed the media or they repotted it for you, it's probably not ideal for household growing, and it will need to be changed or amended. So, you know, that's kind of why we wanted to do this, because you know, it would be so convenient if you just brought home a plant and it was good to go. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. I want to say 95% of the time, unless you're asking the plant shop to repot it in a house plant mix particular to that plant, which, you know, from there, it just kind of, it differs depending on the plant needs. You're going to have to amend them yourself. And knowing these components really helps, I think. Right?
Correct. I agree, because that was the key to keeping the plants alive. You have to know what type of plant parent you are, your environment, and then just your general plant routine and, you know, habit. And one of those major factors that you could address is always your substrate or your mix where you put your plants in.
Totally. So yeah, I think that about covers it, you guys, right?
Yeah, well, I think we didn't touch on orchid bark. A lot, of course,
Yeah.
that's where most of our orchids come from when you buy them from the groceries. Probably the advantages, of course, it's airy. It does retain a little bit of that water, but it's doesn't store the nutrients, right?
No, it doesn't.
And most of the time, yeah, they also just pack it with some decorative moss to cover the orchid bark. So people would think like, oh, this is probably in soil and I could just water it as normal. And when you unveil everything, it's in orchid bark, and that's why it's drying faster.
And there are different grades of all of these different things, right? So orchid bark, there can be like the low grade stuff, and then like you have your, you know, high end, but better quality orchid bark, I should say. And also, you know, the sourcing of it, like what tree it's coming from, can determine how much water retention you're getting from that particular bark. There's a lot that goes into it. I feel like folks who mix their own substrate mixes don't get enough credit because I think it's a lot of work. Like you know, the ones who are really serious about it for indoor growing specifically do a lot of research in sourcing the right components and mixing the right ratio for that particular plant. Like what works for, you know, a chunky, hardy rooted monstera may not necessarily be the best choice for an anthurium who has, you know, roots that are more similar to like orchids, right? They're just two very different things. So, oh, and thank you, Anna Elena Panama. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna.
Yes, and so
and agree with
the comments is saying that this is why I like pond, no more mixing. Yeah, it just it's great. You know, convenient. I love it. Yeah. It's just expensive, you guys. It's pricey and it's hard to get. Like I'm getting a little nervous here because I'm gonna need some more soon. Or maybe I should just not have as many plants and then I would solve my issue, right?
So yeah, I just wanted to say this comment from Plant Core Whore. Am I allowed to read that out? She did make a very nice point that yes, orchid bark does deteriorate faster than the rest of those organic materials. That's why they probably have to be repotted sooner than later. And I have a lot of friends who grow their orchids in Lecca, and I have been growing some of my orchids in pond, but I haven't had success in making them bloom just yet. It's only been less than a year, so stay tuned.
Yes. Oh, I'm excited. No, my garage is not full of pond, you guys. And this is why I can't tell you all where I live. No, I don't have that much pond. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Y'all are funny.
I only have one bag left, and I'm gonna be done after. I mean, I'm gonna run out, but I just opened that one big bag.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting nervous. I won't tell you guys how much I have left, but we'll say I'm getting nervous. It'll be time soon, I think.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that was our crash course, which wasn't a very fast lightning round, huh?
No, I thought it would be, but I talk too much.
I talk too much too. That's probably both our problems, but it's always nice. I love how people are so interactive here on our comments.
No,
so many nice inputs. I wish that they would keep the comments when we save the IGTV because, you know, we're losing a lot of important information from our plant friends over here. But
yeah, Instagram, if you're listening, we would really love for you guys to find a feature where, you know, it's an option to include the comments, because one of the things that Sai and I, you know, we reflect on after these episodes is how valuable the interactions are in the comments. And we see them, and, you know, we love the conversations that you guys have between each other here, because I think it's just a nice common space and casual space for all of us to share experiences with one another. And I just wish that when we download these for IGTV, the comments are included, because yeah, there's, I mean,
yeah, or if we could at least select a few that we would retain, right?
Right. I mean, there's some really great recommendations here for the mixes and compositions that people make. And I think it's all just super valuable. And I wish that we could keep them. But you know what? If you guys are up for it, when these go up, we would love for y'all to share. If you shared them here, we'd love for y'all to share for Team Replay your favorite composition mix in the comments, just so that we have, you know, a great space for everyone to just refer to. Who knows, maybe one day I'll use organic media for something. When I have a greenhouse, I'll move over to organic media. But yeah, if you guys could share those in the comments on our posts when we put them up on IGTV, that would be wonderful. Yes.
We'd appreciate
and
that.
On that note, we've got gymnastics to watch now.
Oh my God.
It's prime time, baby. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for tuning in as usual every week. Thank you guys.
We appreciate everyone so much.
Thank you.